Welcome back. It is Wednesday, the 19th, 1 p.m. Pacific time. It has been a crazy week, I tell you what. California, power outages, fires. It's getting real. Global warming is no joke. I have a really fantastic guest who will be joining me momentarily. He will be Josh West, co-owner and winemaker of Elephant 7. Hope everyone is staying safe out there. It is hot across 3 states of the West Coast. I'll tell you what. Hello.
Hey, Anthony, how are you?
How are you? I'm very well. Yourself?
Doing well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to turn you up a touch. It is hot where I am. I tell you what, heat wave, fires, a lot of crazy things going on. So hope you're staying safe.
Yeah, it's hot everywhere, but I heard it's going to cool down over the next few days. So
hopefully, yeah. Awesome. So for those of our viewers who aren't familiar with Elephant 7 or who you are, can you please introduce yourself and talk a little bit about Elephant 7 and give us some background?
Sure. I'm Josh West, owner, winemaker of Elephant 7. My wife, Cheryl, is the co-owner. I tell everyone that she's the brains behind the operation. I just make the wine.
Awesome.
People think I'm joking, but I'm actually not. She does all the hard stuff. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it today. She's working behind the scenes.
Awesome.
But Elephant 7, our first harvest was in 2014, and so we're very new, especially by the wine world standards.
Sure.
We started, or we focus on Rhone varietals exclusively, out of Walla Walla Valley Vineyards exclusively. We started in a small warehouse in Walla Walla, as so many stories go.
Yeah.
It was very tiny. I had a friend that was kind enough to let me use it. I think I could barely squeeze in all 14 or 15 of my barrels. I think we made about 400 cases that year. We've grown a bit, not tremendously so. We're still very small, a little over 2,000 cases a year we're doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
But when Cheryl and I started, we wanted to make wines that we enjoyed.
Yeah.
And you've probably heard that a lot, but it's a very difficult thing. You hear either winemakers or artists say, I just want to do a craft, and all you can really do is hope that other people will like it.
Sure.
And we've been fortunate enough where apparently at least some people like it, and so things are looking positive. For now, we're going to keep doing Rhone varietals out of Walla Walla Valley Vineyards, exclusively only.
Awesome. Yeah, so you come with an interesting background. Can you talk about your business background and your music background just briefly?
Sure. So Cheryl and I were actually living in Houston, Texas, when we started to go down this path. I work in commodities trading, so I have a background in economics and mathematics, graduate degree in economics.
Nice.
I was working in commodities trading. I was working a lot, very high stress job. And I'm kind of geeky or analytical just by nature. And so, through business and other things, started drinking wine, started wanting to learn about it, started drinking more wine, started collecting wine, started reading dozens of books on it. And then eventually came to the point where Sharon and I were, traveling the world exclusively to see wine regions and eat particular food and drink particular wine. And that was the essence of our trip. So, that just eventually spiraled out of control. And I distinctly remember these are kind of one of the turning points in your life where I came home one day and actually gave Cheryl a PowerPoint presentation on why we should get into the wine business. And she surprisingly was like, yeah, cool, that sounds good. I mean, she deliberated a bit, of course, but, she was there with me and loves food and wine just as much as I did. So from there, I kind of went on a sojourn to New Zealand and worked a harvest there. Kind of spent time reflecting on things. Coming from a business background, what I learned in that experience was, first of all, it's incredibly hard work. I was just a cellar rat doing grunt work. I was fortunate enough that when you go to the Southern Hemisphere, you've probably heard this, there's a lot of winemakers from the Northern Hemisphere that come to the Southern Hemisphere just to get some experience. And so that was, so that was probably the most valuable experience for me, is talking to, made friends with someone who was a winemaker in the Mosel, and his family had been making wine there for 600 years. Or, a guy from Spain who was a winemaker with a facility with like making, 250,000 cases a year or something like that. But just that experience being around those people, plus the idea of, when you're in business, it's very intense, especially in trading, intense cerebral experience. And I find that in wine making, but it's also physical, very dynamic, moving around a lot. And I really enjoyed that side of it. So during this little sojourn, Cheryl actually called it gallivanting, but I learned that I did love it. And, what I also wanted to just, I love the process of making wine. Just going through the process is probably the part that I love the most. Just this concept that, you start in nature, you take something from nature up to harvest, you're doing things, and from there it just evolves, hopefully, into something great. And so just that whole process, even to this day, continues to amaze me.
Cool, awesome. Yeah, I've had plenty of personal vacations in the past where they were specifically centered around wine-centric studies. So instead of like spending a week or two at the beach, we're like, no, we're gonna go to we're gonna fly into Barcelona, and then we're gonna drive up to the top of the hills of Monsanto and go to Priorat and end up sleeping in cars because there's no hotels there, and just get super geeky and yeah, I come back from these vacations just spent needing a vacation from a vacation. And it was just in the last 2 years that my girlfriend's like, can we just actually do a beach vacation? Can we do that? So we flew down to Cabo and spent an entire week there just on the beach, hanging out, eating and
drinking wine on the beach.
Yeah, and oddly enough, because of where we are in the States, there are certain bottlings that they get cheaper in Mexico, and certain brands that they just don't export. So we were enjoying quite a number of some nice Mexican wine, and people were like, "Mexican wine, really? That's a thing? That's a thing?" It's a serious endeavor. There's some serious bottlings out there that are making a serious effort. They're quite interesting. So, what got you into Rhone varietals specifically? Is it just your passion for drinking them and wanting to work with them to make them?
Well, really big picture, Rhone varietals are just sexy, man. They're
agreed.
They can be hedonistic and jammy and massive, or they can be restrained and elegant and minerally and earthy. And there's just such a wide range there that to me is just incredibly attractive. And so, yes, I did, I'm very much a fan of both Northern Rhone and Southern Rhone. But, if you haven't heard it already, or you probably have because it's on our website, you'll hear me talk a lot about a sense of place.
Yeah.
And my opinion is, for whatever it's worth, is that Rhone varietals show their sense of place well. I think particularly Syrah.
Yeah.
And, that's what kind of, the things we talk about, whether it's hedonistic or restrained, it's that sense of place that's really driving that. And so, I could talk a lot about how much I love Rhone varietals. I think the best example actually is of course, there's the heavy hitters in Northern Rhone and Southern Rhone that I first got into. And I had always, or when I started drinking wine, I'd always liked Washington wine, for sure, obviously. But another distinct moment I remember is I walked into a store in Houston. It's called Specs. Yeah. And I picked up a bottle of Gramercy Syrah the first time I had their wine.
Morgan.
And it clicked at that moment that
that's a great first bottle for it to click for Washington Syrah. Like, oh, Gramercy. I think Greg owes you a check right now. I think he's writing it out to Joshua in the mail.
I don't think Greg knows who I am. But no, it was a 2007. Unfortunately, I don't remember the Vineyard source, but it was definitely that moment where I was like, this is what I drink. This is what I like. And it could be done in Washington. And so everything started to come together. We were living in Houston, but Cheryl is born and raised in Seattle, in the Skyway neighborhood of Seattle. And so we had a connection to the Northwest. That's where her and I had actually met. Um, and so it just, all these things started to come together of, I'm geeking out on wine. I love that.
Right.
I love the Rhone Valley. I see things happening in Walla Walla that are really cool and are kind of, representing something different and unique.
Yeah.
And so it's just exciting.
Awesome. I tell you what, all this talk about Rhone varietals and wine is making me a little thirsty. We've got some wines to try. First of which we have the 2018 Yellowbird Vineyard Grenache. This is 80% Grenache with 20% Syrah from Yellowbird Vineyard. If you want to go ahead and introduce it, talk about it, and talk about why you wanted to make this style.
Sure. So at a high level, I love Grenache, period. I think even on its own, it can be fantastic. It's just got those beautiful aromatics. If done right, it can be incredibly elegant. If you're not careful, it can err to the side of sappy and almost cherry cough syrup like. But when done right, it's of course absolutely beautiful, and I think one of the best varietals in the world. This particular one, I put 20% Syrah in there, and I had tried my best to calibrate it to keeping it Grenache. So when you pick it up, the olfactory senses hit you. You know it's Grenache, and that's what always hits me first, especially with Grenache, even in general, but especially with Grenache, is some of those olfactory senses. So I wanted it to still be Grenache. I do think if you're not careful, sometimes Grenache can be a little angular, if that makes any sense. And so I think adding that Syrah kind of helps round it out and just kind of bring it together, add a little bit more tannin structure to it. But I still wanted it to be very much Grenache, and hence the reason I call it Grenache, not some other blend. This particular one is, I'm going to abide with you if you don't mind.
For sure.
This particular one is 100% whole cluster fermentation. Like everything I do, it's wild fermentation or feral fermentation, aged in French oak. This wasn't aged in neutral French oak. And the 2018, I think is great. I'm super happy with it. It's hard to see on camera, but if you're looking at it, it's got that typical garnet hue. There you go. Yep. That's got that garnet hue that Grenache has. 2018 was a little unusual for me, so I actually racked the Grenache. In previous 3 or 4 years, I hadn't done that. I found, I don't know about others, but I found that Grenache isn't at risk at becoming reduced. So I like to leave it on lees and just kind of let it be. Early on, I'll stir the lees, and then after that, I just let it sit in barrel, and it's quite frankly that simple. It had a little bit of reduction in 2018. Not 100% sure why, so I decided to rack it. So this year, you're not seeing any sediment. In years past, if you had a previous bottle, you'd actually see a little bit of sediment in there. Since I don't filter. I kind of like that. I wear it as a badge of honor. But
sure. I noticed that last year in the previous bottling, and I particularly like wines that have a little bit of sediment, just because that means that integrity, that flavor, that is traveled from with the juice into the winery, into the barrel, into the bottle, and it has a little bit more kind of robustness and flavor. Once you take that off, yes, you're cleaning it up, but it tends to strip away just a little bit of that flavor, that leaving just a little bit of that unfiltered quality in the wine, and I appreciate those wines.
Yeah, and I like the mouthfeel. There's some scientific studies out there that debate whether or not it helps the mouthfeel. I think it does, and I'll talk more about it later. But you're making a lot of decisions in the winery that are really important, and at some point you have to commit to something. And I'm committed to unfiltered. I think it helps represent the sense of place better.
For sure, awesome. Yeah, I've been noticing a growing trend in Walla Walla specifically for the Rhone varietals, for not using as much oak or as little oak. Or even experimenting with different fermentation levels, with the inclusion of stems or semi-carbonic for the Rhone varietals, and I think it's a really smart idea. There's like this fresh hop that you get immediately that
totally.
you can drink them, but they can still age as well, which is if you think of wines like Barolo, or wines like certain Sauvignon Blancs, one is certain styles of wine are made for right now. They've got a very short window.
Yep.
Where Barolo, if you're a glutton for punishment, you can pop open a brand new release and grind your teeth with the sandpaper tannins that ultimately becomes far more soft and beautiful with a decade or so of age. And when you find the right balance of making a wine so when you release it, it's beautiful, fresh, vibrant, flow, and it's popping and it's enjoyable, but can age for 10 years and it's still just as good. It's changed slightly over the evolution, but it's just as enjoyable. That is a very challenging thing to do.
Yeah, and it evolves too. And people ask a lot about the whole cluster stuff, and I love experimenting with it. So Grenache, usually I do either all or mostly all whole cluster fermentation, just because it's able to absorb some of those tannins. The Syrah, sometimes I'll do whole cluster, sometimes 50, 25%, sometimes none, or whole berry or something else, and just kind of experiment with it. But a lot of times, you do have to gauge almost the ripeness of the Reiki or the stem itself to include it. So there is a little bit of a risk of getting those green tannins in there. But to your point, I think Rhone varietals are more amenable to having that whole cluster component to it, whereas something like Nebbiolo, it's already got massive tannins naturally. So
yeah,
something that you want to be careful with. Yeah. But I totally agree. There's lots of really creative folks in Walla Walla right now, and it's exciting to be a part of that and see that. A real quick afield, if you don't mind. You mentioned Piedmont. I love Piedmont.
Yeah, cool.
I love Barolo. There was another moment in Cheryl and I's kind of path to getting where we are today. Kind of driving through Piedmont, looking at the different microclimates and slopes there, and talking about it. And I kind of went to Cheryl, I was like, isn't it amazing that people just do this, for a living, and it's part of their life.
Yeah.
And Cheryl was kind of like, well, you love what you do, right? And I'm like, yeah, I love what I do, but this is, vastly different. Yeah. And so it was another moment where we kind of looked at each other and I'm like, I don't know, maybe we could do something like this. Yeah. But just the discussion on Barolo sparked that. I love Barolo, and I often get, what was my favorite bottle of wine. It's incredibly hard to say. I like to steal from, I forget his first name, but the founder of Gaia, who said, he was describing this very long story about his favorite bottle of wine, and it ended up he didn't really know what the bottle was because it was the experience. Yeah. So it wasn't necessarily that for me, but we were in Piedmont eating at a Michelin-rated a restaurant in like a cellar, eating egg cocotti with white truffles and poured a 96 Domenico Clerico, and it's like one of those moments where you sit back and you're like, oh, man, this is it right here. I don't know if it gets any better.
For sure. Yeah. See, whenever I have moments like those, I'm always tempted to take a picture, but then I always pause and reflect and say, no, like, this is my moment. I'm keeping it. Yeah. That's part of I think some of the kind of mystique about winemakers. Once they understand agriculture, grape growing, fermentation science, and then the art of winemaking. I mean, it's the whole repertoire of making wine and enjoying wine is one of those arts that there's only a handful on the planet that requires, or doesn't require, but you can use all five senses to enjoy the experience of the art form. And that's one of the coolest things about winemaking as a whole is there's a lot of science involved, but it's also an art form. And no matter if you were to live Groundhog Day, the whole thing of like reliving the day over and over again, if you could relive the year over and over again, I guarantee you most winemakers would end up making slightly different wine if they had to repeat every situation, just because there are so many variables that are always moving. It's a moving target. And there's something to be said about standing back and saying, let's just let Mother Nature do the work, and we'll step in when it's time and receive all the hard work that Mother Nature has done, and we'll just try and make something from that. And I feel that that's what you do with a kind of a minimal approach to certain things, but to capture the essence of what's actually happening with the vineyards, with the grapes, with the vintage, and it ends up in the wine. And these wines are some of the most pleasurable for me because they change from year to year, and I appreciate that. So, yeah,
yeah, and it's a hard thing to do, actually. I don't know for sure, but I think a lot of winemakers would admit this. You know, there's lots of things you can do, and you need to deliberate on. And at times you feel like you want to do something, you really want to do something, and it takes a lot of restraint to to stay the course, especially when you use practices like wild farrow fermentations or other things where you're kind of committed to not using chemicals and changing it later. It can be a little risky, but
for sure.
If you're trying to reflect something from nature, I think it's worth it.
I concur. I'm sitting here staring at the Syrah, and it's staring back at me. Is there anything else you want to say about the Grenache before we go on to the Syrah?
No, I don't think so. I think we covered the Grenache, and we'll be tasting well today.
Oh, awesome. You've got to talk about these labels as well. I'm very intrigued. Looking at them, they're very minimalistic, but they're just, you look at it, you see on the shelf, you're like, what is that? Who are those guys? They definitely capture people's attention, and the wines are tasty. So this is the 2017 Yellowbird Syrah Vineyard, Yellowbird Vineyard Syrah, and it's 93% Syrah, co-fermented with 7% Viognier, which I get super excited when I hear the words co-fermentation. So go ahead and take us through this wine and talk about why you decided to use co-fermentation in the kind of cut roti style, and what drove you to make this wine.
Sure. So as you mentioned, it's co-fermented, and it's actually the Viognier that's in this block of Syrah is actually interspersed. And so I just pick it all at the same time.
Awesome.
It was intentional, again, kind of getting inspiration from Côte Rôtie or others. So in some ways it was an easy decision. It was there, and I was going to do it anyway. But I love what it brings. I really do think it brings some of those extra floral tones that you could probably pick up on. Mm-hmm. This wine in particular, I tend to pick a little bit on the early side for up there. I believe it's roughly 50% whole cluster fermentation. Again, wild fermentation on fine unfiltered, aged in French oak. I think this one is roughly 20% new French oak. I tend to kind of go somewhere around there. I don't use a lot of oak, but I think at times it can add a nice component to it as long as there's a pure fruit expression.
I concur. Sometimes at least listen to the wine, and if the wine needs just a little bit of oak, just listen to the wine. And I think we made the right choice. I think if this had seen just all neutral oak, it might have been slightly flat across the mid palate. It just there's something that when you said 20%, I was like, that's what I was figuring. But it just adds a little bit more texture and character across the mid palate. It's tasty.
Yeah, and the site up there, we can talk more about it in a bit if you want, but the site up there produces, I think, just fabulous Syrah. It's in the Mill Creek area is what it's called in Walla Walla. It's in the foothills of the Blue Mountains, which are on the east side of Walla Walla, a higher elevation site. It's dry farmed, and so just by nature, it's low yields. The berries it produces and the clusters it produces are very small. Mm-hmm. And I think it just makes a really well concentrated Syrah that's not overpowering. It's got some fruit, it's got good tannins, but maintains that acidity, nice precision. Mm-hmm. So super excited about it when I had the opportunity to work with it, and just love the site up there. Trying to think if there's anything else in particular about this wine that I can tell you. Those are the major points on it.
Cool. So tell me the story behind the labels. Who's the artist? What's the meaning behind them?
Sure. So I'll actually back up. If we go back to the Yellowbird Grenache, that's an interesting one. So Cheryl and I were we're walking through Seattle in a particularly urban area,
Mhm.
and we saw this one sunflower just sticking out like in a very, very tiny little yard.
Awesome.
It was big. It was big. You know, it really stood out.
Mhm.
And you know, typically you see sunflowers, excuse me, with surrounded by other sunflowers.
Correct. Yeah.
But this one just stood out in the middle of this urban scene, and so it just really inspired us. I mean, not only is it Cheryl's favorite flower, but we just thought that was really cool. The labels themselves, I love minimalist art.
Mhm.
And so you can obviously see some of that here.
For sure.
And so we're intentionally using that white space. So it doesn't look like it. You know, they say simplicity is hard. We're using that white space very intentionally. And I think it almost, you know, it almost makes people feel a little uncomfortable,
Mhm.
especially in this day and age. Excuse me. Especially in this day and age when there's just so much noise around you.
Yeah.
Again, looking back to the sunflower, it's kind of odd to see so much space, and it makes people uncomfortable, maybe even conjures up some emotions.
Mhm.
And so that's what we're trying to do there. And then if you go from there, it's kind of trying to make it imaginative or whimsical. You know, I sometimes joke around with people when they ask about the labels, and I just say, well, I didn't want to make it boring. You know, I didn't want to play around with 50 different fonts and try to figure something out.
Nice.
But yeah, we wanted it to be fun, imaginative, and almost playful. So it's a little bit more modern approach.
Mhm.
I think, you know, from what people tell me, our wines are a little bit more traditional, old world in style, but a little bit more modern take on the overall packaging. And we think it sticks out. Even if you don't like it, if you think it's over simple, I think people will definitely remember it and take notice.
No, for sure. It's when they first came across my desk for tasting, I was like, okay, cool. Like, all right, let's check this out. You know, 'cause there's still a lot of people that look, they buy with their eyes first. Like we eat with our eyes. You know, how many times have you seen a steak that looks good or a dish that looks good? You try, you're like, oh, it doesn't taste good. It's like, well, you've got to think about what's in the dish. So there's things that you might not like that are ingredients that are in the dish, but there's a reason why there's a you know, it's $1 trillion business in marketing and just putting something out there and seeing if people want it, and that catches my eye. It's smart. So what's I mean, clearly this is your logo for the winery, Elephant Seven.
Yeah, that's kind
your
of
wife's brother makes does the artwork. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't follow through with who makes the art. So Cheryl and I kind of come up with the concept, and Cheryl's brother Romel Villalobos is an artist and kind of executes it for us.
Mhm.
So we keep it in the family.
Cool, smart. So what? I'm assuming the elephant with the 7 red balloons is an homage to Elephant 6.
Not necessarily the label. I guess I didn't describe that in the beginning. Elephant 7 is, you know, no connection, of course, but inspired by the Elephant 6 music collective.
Gotcha.
You know, the reason they formed a collective was because they wanted to be dedicated towards the craft. And like them, you know, whether it makes economic or sense or not, you kind of throw commercial expectations out the window and, you know, put one foot forward and dedicate yourself towards the craft. And
Sure.
you know, they have some quotes on that kind of inspired us, and that's where the name comes from. This label in particular was just, you know, something we thought was fun and creative.
For sure, yeah, it catches my eye, and I actually last trip to Walla Walla, I was there for report duty. You had just opened up your tasting room not too long. It was about what, midsummer or early spring in 2019, was it?
Yeah, summer 2019.
Yeah, and I was there in July and was going to just kind of, you know, crash in and be like, hey, want to see what's going on? Really enjoy it. And, unfortunately, it wasn't time, and then we're going to connect this year for a report, but global pandemic hits the world and everyone is on house arrest basically. So
Yeah.
so it's kind of how it is. But yeah, I look forward to getting in and checking out your new tasting room in Walla Walla.
Yeah.
Looking from the pictures, it looks very thoughtful. It looks like a very cool hip place and looks very comfortable as well, which is
Yeah.
important.
Thank you. And to your point on all the senses, the entire experience adds up to something, right? The wine label coming there, it's much better to come visit Charleroi and taste there with the overall feeling. It's just goes back to our commentary on, it's an experience, and wine is an experience, and hopefully you can make it in next time, and as can others.
Eventually, once everything cools down for a bit. I really enjoy this Syrah. It's very tasty. I mean, you can see like how dark it is. It's nicely done. One thing I like that I enjoy about co-fermentation, there are enzymes in the skin of Vineyard that help stabilize the color of Syrah, but it also lifts the expression aromatically that gives it this beautiful, slightly heady floral thing. But the Syrah is the classic Syrah notes. You get those slight kind of black olive notes, the blackberry, the slightly kind of smoked meat and savory essence that kind of flutters through there. But then there's a really nice mineral tension that I get from Walla Walla, and it's not as overbearing as Red Mountain can be sometimes. But the reason why Cabernet is so prolific on Red Mountain because it can take some of that kind of almost grittiness, that richness, and that's why I like some really, really robust, great wines. So let's talk about Yellowbird Vineyard. Why did you want to work with the fruit there, and how did you ultimately get connected with the Chan family who owned the vineyard?
Yeah, so just being honest, I kind of looked into it.
Looks like we're having a slight connection issue. Hopefully we'll get him back. This happened with Alex of Colcita. Hopefully we can get him back. Let's see. Is staying safe. It looks like we just lost him. So yeah, let's see if we can get him back in here. Let's send him another request. Earlier today, I saw helicopters flying around outside. He's back. Hello.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. It just froze up. I had to send another request.
It happens.
It's funny, I could hear you. Anyway, so yeah, Cheryl was working at Dunham Cellars, and Kenny Hart is their vineyard manager, and he's also the vineyard manager for Yellowbird Vineyard. And kind of got talking to him, said I wanted to start playing around with some Syrah. And, I knew there was some Syrah up on the Mill Creek area, foothills of the Blue Mountains. I had actually interned at Figgins Family, so I was very familiar with the area. They, of course, have their Figgins Family estate up there. And absolutely loved the wines from up there, but didn't really know I had an opportunity to use fruit from up there. Kenny said he'd give me just 1 acre to test out, so I kind of looked into it. Normally, that's not something that a brand new winemaker is going to be able to use.
Right place, right time. Sometimes how life works. When the opportunity is given, you take that opportunity and you hold on.
Yeah, totally. So got connected through that. Then I, of course, met the Chan family after that, and just immediately absolutely fell in love with the vineyard. As I told you, the berries and clusters are beautiful. They're kind of sparse and tiny, but I love that. The berry weight is somewhere around 0.8 grams per berry. It's a little bit of a windy site, so you get a little bit thicker skins on the Syrah up there. It's dry farmed, so naturally low yields. I don't know if you've had a chance to go up there. It's just absolutely gorgeous. Just overlooks the whole Walla Walla Valley. It sits at about 1,450 feet elevation. And so eventually just started taking all of their Rhone stuff from up there. It's not incredibly well known for the Rhone stuff up there, but I do very much think it's coming with that vineyard and a few other vineyards that are popping up a little bit higher elevation up there in the Blue Mountains.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I have not been to the Blue Mountains yet, but the way I study to learn new things is I'm a very visual person. So I live on Google Earth and the Street View. You can put the little guy in the Street View and kind of look around. Um, I like to do that up there, take the roads in and kind of look around. And then pictures of friends who have been camping up there. And I'm friends with Christopher Chan, the son of Doctors Chan.
Yep.
Very good people. But I think he's currently there at Yellowbird Vineyard now, and he's posting pictures on his social media pages saying, Yellowbird, it's beautiful sunset today. Hanging out, living life.
Well, you got to make them feel guilty and let them, or have you out and sit on the back porch there and overlook all the beautiful birds.
Eventually.
But yeah, it's a beautiful site. Feel fortunate to have worked with it, and super happy with it.
Some very beautiful fruit. So
yeah,
is there
go ahead. I was just gonna say, one of the things you kind of get from that Mill Creek area, I think, is this kind of you get all the typical Syrah characteristics, and maybe this is the Viognier pulling it out, but I think just the aromatics from all fruit, including the Bordeaux stuff that comes off that area, are just highly aromatic, very high tone, beautiful aromatics that are very floral in nature. And so, whether it's lavender or wilders, whatever you want to call it, I love that kind of component to it.
For sure, yeah. There's definitely this purple flower bouquet that exists, kind of floats on the top, which I have right now. So I'm going to pour myself a skosh more. So talking about these different Rhone varietals, is there another varietal that you haven't worked with that you would like to work with sometime over your winemaking career?
For now, I am committed to Rhone varietals, but I have always been curious by Pinot Noir. Like we've talked about, that is, I think, very terroir or sense of place driven.
For sure. Very finicky.
I've never made it before, but like you said, it's finicky, but I kind of like a good challenge. Okay. And I love Pinot Noir, and I especially love it when it's done well.
So are you thinking about growing and making Pinot Noir in Walla Walla?
I'm not personally, no, but it just hypothetically, if I were to do another varietal, just to play around with something, it would be Pinot Noir. I love it, drink a lot of it. Probably the best wine experience I've had. I've had a lot. It's hard to rank them, but one of them was going to Burgundy and just renting a bike and riding from Coconui all the way through Beaune, all the way through Côte de Beaune. That's awesome. And just tremendous experience. I have a lot of respect for that region, and just so much fun to be standing there on your bike, like 5 feet away from this 2 hectare Grand Cru vineyard. It's super cool. So anyway, I love Pinot. I'd like to give it a try. And if I could cheat and do one more, I think kind of Gamay flies a little bit below the radar.
I concur.
I love Cru Beaujolais. I think it's super fun, but it can also be serious. Don't get me wrong. So I love Gamay. I think it'd be really fun to play around with some like whole cluster carbonic maceration. Do something super fresh and minerally like you get out of Beaujolais. So that's been in the back of my head. I don't know if I'll ever get to do it, but I think it'd be a lot of fun, and I think it's underappreciated varietal.
I think if you truly wanted to do and work with both those varietals, I think contracts are in order for Willamette to where you are, because you could be able to get that fruit in fairly easy.
Yep.
I think Pinot Noir and Gamay in the Columbia Valley, while there are some microclimates that might be able to grow them, I'm still not fully convinced that Pinot Noir is highly successful from Washington. I was talking to a winemaker the other day, and they said, "Of course, Washington has Pinot Noir. We call it something different. It's called Grenache here, but yeah."
It's funny. I mean, in terms of the actual structure of the wine, Grenache is pretty similar, actually. Phenolic structure,
Just completely
higher alcohol
completely different growing climate though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Higher alcohol content. It loves heat. Doesn't like the cold. So it's different, but it's there are some similarities actually. I do think the Columbia Gorge has some good Pinot Noir coming out of there.
Yeah, yeah. They do, but I mean, nothing that to me nothing that is currently rivaling that of what Willamette is doing, and what California is doing, and what New Zealand is doing, and of course what Burgundy is doing. So there are microclimates, but I'm not fully convinced yet. So let's.
Yeah, fair enough. And you're right. You can get certainly people do it. Ship Willamette Pinot up to Washington to make it. So yeah, it's doable. It's just my focus remains on Rhone stuff.
For sure. Yeah, and I'm glad because this juice is great. It's good
Thank
stuff.
you.
So on your website, your philosophy states that you have a focus on simplicity, and you want to, and you don't want to, and you want to basically adjust the fruits and the wine as little as possible, basically keeping the integrity, the sincerity, and the sense of place intact. Why is that necessarily so important to you and the brand?
Yeah, so going back to what we were talking about before, I don't know about others, but to me, the most romantic thing in wine is the sense of place and where something comes from.
Yeah.
I love that concept. That's what lured me into wine. Like I said, the concept that you could be drinking a wine from some very, very specific clos in Burgundy or some specific slope in Piedmont. Just that concept of a sense of place and where that wine is coming from, I think is absolutely critical. And when you're making wine, you're doing hundreds of steps, and sometimes you're just, you just got to do it. You're not really thinking all that much, and so those hundreds of steps, however small they might be, they add up to something bigger. And what that bigger thing is, to me, is kind of your compass or your northern star, or what guides you. And for me, that is that sense of place. And so I feel like, starting with something in nature, being committed to that and being committed to something simple is actually, like we said, really hard to do.
Yeah.
I think you talk to artists, musicians, craftsmen, winemakers. There's an art to simplicity, and it's really hard to do. But I think when you commit to that, and that's your kind of guiding star or your compass, all those small things you do are going to add up to something that's still true to what you're trying to do. And in this case, it's representing a specific sense of place. And so that commitment to sense of place is what guides me. And I don't want to make a beverage. I want to make a wine that is true to where it comes from.
That's awesome. I can certainly respect that. So, in talking about making wine from where it comes from, with your bottling range, are there any plans to expand your bottling range or to expand production, since you're currently at about 2,000 cases?
Yeah, so we definitely have to grow a little bit to to be able to have a decent living for Cheryl and I and our family. So we do have to grow a bit. We don't have ambitions of growing very large, certainly not right now. If we got up to 4,000 or 5,000 cases a year with our model, we could, we could sustain a nice living. So not a lot of plans to get larger. For our wine club, I'm always going to experiment with just little geeky bottlings here and there, super small lots.
Cool.
I've been wanting to do this for a while now, but do kind of a Marsanne-Roussanne blend and
Awesome.
just a ton of different stuff. I did a Syrah that was a little bit more hedonistic, but by my standards, just for what we call the collective. So our collective is our wine club. Cool. And one of the collective members kind of asked me about that, challenged me on that, said, maybe you can't do it. And so I did it just for fun. So we'll always do small lots of fun stuff for our wine club. We do want to grow a bit, but no intention of getting very large.
Yeah. I noticed I was on your website the other day, looking at some of the new a month or 2 or 3 months ago, whatever it was, looking at what you had submitted this year for review, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. It looks like they're expanding a little bit, and went to your website, and it looks like you have included 2 or 3 more labels into the range. Was that's just this year, or something that you've had, but now there's a little bit, there's enough of where you can actually start to sell them?
Yeah, so it just depends. What we do often is we have the Yellowbird Grenache, the Yellowbird Syrah, in a Blue Mountain Viognier that we'll do every year. Then we have little lots that we're just going to do just for fun. They're going to have different labels. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, I don't know exactly what's up there right now, but I can tell you the new release that I'm super excited about is I'm doing a Syrah from the rocks again. Cool. So I think you may have seen that. It's a white label with a guitar case on it, and
yeah.
That's
what got me interested in the whole thing. It's like, oh, cool. Now there's a guitar on it. There's a sunflower. Now there's an elephant with red balloons, and now there's a guitar on it. It's a guitar case open. I was like,
yeah. So yeah, the River Rock Syrah we released to our collective or wine club in May. It's a fairly new release for us. It's your typical rock Syrah. I think maybe a little bit more restrained. It's a little lower in alcohol. I think it's 13.4% alcohol, a little bit higher in acidity. I can't remember the number right off the top of my head. But very savory style. The term used is funk, but I think it's earthy and reduced or reductive style of winemaking that comes from that region. And so it's very much in line with that. Super excited about it. I can't remember the exact numbers. I think it's 20 to 30% new oak, a little bit of whole cluster. I didn't do a lot on this. I picked fairly early, so I wanted to be careful with that and make sure the stems and Reiki weren't too unripe. But yeah, making a Syrah from the rocks again that we're super excited about and is just getting out there now. I think I had another one on there. We called it the Anita Syrah. That is named after Cheryl's mother. That was 100% whole cluster, single clone, slightly higher new oak Syrah from Yellowbird Vineyard. That again was intended for our wine club and just kind of a special one-off thing that we'll do. We did one for her father the year before that, and so we're just kind of experimenting with little lots here, and we'll continue to geek out on stuff like that.
That's great. That's great. So it seems like there's a progression moving forward. You see what you have now. You see where you are now. You see that you have to grow. Where do you see your brand ultimately within 10 to 20 years?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we get up to a size where we're can remain completely independent and have that longevity that we want. I mean, big picture, the dream is have a biodynamic vineyard up in the foothills of the Blue Mountains.
Awesome.
Obviously, that's not easy to do, but it's nice to have that dream when you're looking 10 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the state vineyard that's biodynamic would be the dream.
Awesome. So, are you? So like you're studying biodynamics, you're ready to implement this when if you buy a vineyard, you're ready to go full biodynamic?
Yeah, I mean, I know a little bit about it, but I would of course need help. I would need a vineyard manager to do that for you. That's another thing you learn is it's humbling. I mean, as a winemaker, I've got a background in viticulture for sure, but some of these folks that have been in 30, 40 years, that's just a tremendous amount of knowledge that you don't want to let go to waste. And so to properly biodynamic farm and make sure you're following the Demeter standards, I would need someone to help me with the vineyard management for sure. But it's something I'm passionate about, and it goes back to whether it's organic or biodynamic. I don't say it doesn't matter, but the point I think is that it's about nature. It's about being sustainable. It's about producing something that is pure and expressing where it comes from. And I think both biodynamic farming and organic farming definitely do that. I haven't got a chance to work with biodynamic fruit yet. It's very hard to come by. It's hard to farm that way.
For sure. For sure.
But it's something I would like to do in the future.
Yeah. There's a lot of, pros and cons to biodynamics, but I see its potential. Part of the problem in the States is that you have to be certified, and that means someone has to come out to the vineyard and they've got to check and and you've got to pay for the certification as well. It's not necessarily cheap. So that cost has to be passed along to the consumer ultimately.
That's right.
But what I see as a serious threat to Washington, besides the heat, is the access to the water and the way that just global industry is working. It seems that we don't have enough respect for Mother Nature, and when we put all these chemicals and pollutants in the air, in the ground, they end up in the groundwater. And I wish that there were more people like you that respected that, because once you have a clean vineyard and you're not putting all these different chemicals and pesticides and slowly killing the soil that gives us fruits or vegetables, I think it's a very smart thing to at least look into as a producer, because biodynamics, I've had wines that were literally farmed exactly the same way. One was just regular farmed with Roundup and other stuff. One was organic and one was biodynamic. And there is a difference. It's not amazingly apparent, but there is subtleties. And looking at both of those vineyards, if you were to fast forward time, you would see what the chemicals and pollutants have done to the soil and done to the earth over time. Where if you can naturally bring these elements to feed the plant and to curb other pests naturally, that's the best way to do it, because you're using nature to grow your fruit and to make clean wine.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think sustainability is something that the entire wine industry is going to have to look hard at, and how that's going to affect us going forward. And so, again, I know there's a lot of debate around biodynamics, organic or not, or natural winemaking, whatever that means. But again, it comes back to big picture. What are you trying to do? What are you, what are you committed to? And when it comes to sustainability, you got to be committed to something. Otherwise, you're not going to move the needle.
I concur. 100%. Life is too short not to try and do something good to the planet and leave it slightly better for our children one day. So. We are just about up. I know that Instagram cuts us off at about an hour or so. About that time. Do you have any, last words, parting thoughts for us for the future? Anything you want to talk about?
Well, I want to give a very sincere thanks to the folks that helped Elephant 7 get started, whether it's friends and family, especially our collective members. Without them, we wouldn't be here where we are today. And very, very humbled by being invited on this. I greatly appreciate thoughts from Wine Advocate and you, Anthony. And
sure.
Yeah, I'm humbled to be here. It's super cool, and greatly appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I know that you said you're kind of traveling out and about right now, but keep making this juice. That's what it's all about. This is super tasty. Oh, there's your son.
This is my assistant winemaker, Matthias.
Nice. Hello, Matthias.
Hi, Anthony.
How are you?
All right, you're done.
Awesome. Fantastic.
He wanted to say hi.
Well, it looks like you have a wonderful family. So keep doing what you're doing. Keep up the great work. These wines are delicious, and I look forward to watching your career as a winemaker, and as you grow your brand, to see what becomes of Elephant 7 and how these wines ultimately evolve. So
awesome.
Keep up the great work.
Again, and cheers.
Cheers. So keep it locked here for next week. Next Wednesday, I will have Jeffrey Lindsay Thorson from WT Vintners joining me. Really, really good guy. An advanced somm, really talented winemaker. We have a lot of cool things to chat about. Until then, stay safe, drink well, and be kind to others. Cheers.
See everyone.